All right, welcome back. We are continuing on by finishing up the Wu-Tang collection with a handful of really great Wu affiliated albums. And then we are going to start our deep dive into our Boot Camp collection, which there's a lot of classic records in that one. So to start us off, have an album from Ninth Prince. He was basically the founder of Kill Army. He is also the RZA's younger brother. This is an interesting album. I much prefer Prince as part of Kill Army. But if you enjoy the Kill Army music, you really can't go wrong with that. Bronze Nazareth, fantastic producer, fantastic MC. There's a lot of people that consider this to be a classic album. I think it's a very solid, very well made, uh, all around great album. I actually saw Bronze live years and years and years ago. I showed up to one of his shows, and the promoter had basically just taken the money and ran, and I was the only person at that show. So I got a chance to kick it with him and the Wisemen, which was his group. They gave me this CD for free, and I got a chance to really sit down with the cat in a group named Kevlar7. Just super, super cool, man. We had a great conversation, and sadly, a few years after that, he passed away. So this CD, specifically this CD, which they gave to me then, always, it's always held a special place in my heart. I always enjoy Bronze. I've always enjoyed the Wisemen. And I think all of his material, all of their material is top quality Wu affiliate material. Silver Rings, probably best known as the mastermind behind that legendary only one copy made Wu-Tang album that the Pharma Bro bought and it sold for however many millions. This is the guy that masterminded that album. This is his solo debut. Solid album. I don't know if I would highly recommend it, but I do think it's interesting. I do think he's a very capable producer, and I think if you're a Wu-Tang fan, there's a lot to enjoy there. Holocaust kind of became a running joke because he had that legendary verse on RZA's Bobby Digital album, and then everything he put out after that was just batshit insane. This was notable because it was produced by Blue Sky Black Death, which is a duo of some of the two of my favorite producers in modern times. They had a run where they put out a lot of really incredible albums. They produced this album for him. It is absolutely as batshit insane as you would imagine. It sounds like the ramblings of a drunken, schizophrenic alcoholic, but the production on this is top notch. It is some of the best production you will ever hear come out of the underground. And I would recommend that strictly because of how insane it is. And I would also recommend this, which is the instrumental version. Hellraiser and Shabazz, Thug Angels. This album was very highly recommended to me. I thought it was okay. I didn't think the production, I didn't find the production very interesting, but it's still a very solid, well put together LP. There's not much I can fault it on other than the fact that I don't find it that interesting. But this is definitely Hellraiser's classic album. And again, this is another one. As you can see, it's produced by Blue Sky Black Death. This might be some of their absolute best production. This also features an absolutely legendary verse from Crooked Eye on the song Halos. This is where a lot of people in the underground outside of the West Coast started to really take notice of Crooked Eye. This album is incredible. This finally saw Blue Sky Black Death link up with a rapper that actually complemented their production, and I would very highly recommend that to everybody. And of course, I also have the instrumental version to go with it. Black Market Militia presents William Cooper. This is William Cooper's album. I picked this up strictly because it has a song here with Cool G Rap that American Gangsters, and Cool G Rap bodied that track. And it was one of my favorite modern day Cool G Rap verses. I picked it up off the strength of that alone. This is actually a very solid, put together, cohesive album. Like it executes exactly what it sets out to. This one is definitely for the diehards, but I think if you are interested in it, you're going to enjoy it. Mathematics, which is one of the Wu-Tang's, I don't say second tier in a bad way, but he's kind of, the B team producers. You got Mathematics and a handful of other guys that RZA kind of pulls in. This album wasn't that great. It's one I'd probably have to revisit, but I remember Mathematics put out a few albums that really didn't connect with me in a way that I would have liked. GP Wu. This is another one of those cult classic Wu-Tang albums. GP Wu, 3 or 4 members, I can't remember exactly. Pop the Brown Hornet is probably the member that has the most visibility. That's definitely, it's a cult classic for a reason. And again, it's one of those albums where if you have an interest in it, you're really going to dig it. Classic LP for the Wu fans. And we're going to be saying that a few times. Law of the Dark Man, Heist of the Century. I was actually just riding around with this one not that long ago. Again, I really enjoy Law's music because a lot of the Wu affiliates are kind of grouped together in groups, and Law was just by himself. This is a really great, dark, atmospheric, mafioso, hardcore, East Coast hip-hop album. And I think out of all the Wu affiliate projects, this might be the best one. Wu Syndicate. That's another one where it's another cult classic for a lot of people. Very under the radar nowadays, I would say. But that's another really great one. Shaheem, the Rugged Child. I don't have his first album, which bums me out, because his first album was always the one that I always wanted to get. But my buddy had it, so I didn't feel like I needed to have it. Now I just haven't had a chance to track it down. I really like Shaheem. He was the Wu-Tang's kid rapper, with air quotes around it. He was a younger rapper. He put out a handful of albums that kind of see him growing up. That's a solid album. I think Shaheem actually put out a lot of solid albums. We're going into the Boot Camp Clik now. This was their debut album as a group. Not the first album they put out, but their first album as a group. The Boot Camp Clik, obviously, Helter Skelter, Black Moon, Smith & Wesson, OGC. This album, it's a solid album, but it's not. Boot Camp Clik's problem was that as the smaller groups and solo artists, they put out better records than they did as the actual Boot Camp Clik. So like this album was cool, but it wasn't what we had hoped it was going to be. Same could be said for this one. This one, I believe Rockness Monster was not on this one at all. This is when he had a brief split from the group. Both these albums, by the way, though, they're both very solid records. Don't let my disappointment from them not being classics dissuade you from checking them out, because they are both really solid albums. I actually think this one is probably their best group album, and this was after they made a comeback. I think this one's got a lot of the same production styles that like Sean Price's Monkey Bars and stuff. I think Ninth Wonder's on this as far as beats. I think this is probably their best, most cohesive record that they put out as the Boot Camp Clik. And if you're going to start with a boot camp record, like as a group, this is the one I would highly recommend. This, though, is the legendary classic album that really kicked off the whole boot camp movement. This is Black Moon, Enter the Stage. This is just raw, dirty, East Coast, underground. If you're a fan of that early 90s New York hip-hop, you've probably already heard this, but if you're just getting into it, this one is an absolute must. If you enjoy albums like Big L's Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous, this is very similar in tone and vibe. Buckshot, he's the main MC, incredibly underrated, underappreciated rapper. Followed it up with Warzone, which while not as good, I still think is a solid record. I think all the Black Moon records are actually fairly solid. This is probably my least favorite of their actual records, what they actually put out, but it's still good. This one was low-key one of my favorites for a long time, especially the first few tracks. First few songs on this album has an incredibly strong start. That's a really solid one. A lot of people overlook this one. I would definitely revisit that if you slept on it. This one was awful though. This was Buckshot has some work with Ninth Wonder, which we'll be touching on shortly. And this was a remix of one of the Ninth Wonder albums that, well, obviously you can see Evil D, Mr. Walt did. They went back, they remixed it, and it just didn't. The Beat Miners are responsible for some of the boot camp's best music, especially when it comes to Black Moon. They produced the Black Moon music. This album just did not connect. It's just completely, everything about it was a miss to me. Like, I really, really did not enjoy anything about that one. And this one, Digging in the Vaults, that's just B-sides, remixes, 12 inches. That's, if you enjoy the early Black Moon, this one is an essential companion piece. I actually avoided Buckshot's solo debut because I heard such bad things. I heard it was a mediocre record. I heard it failed to live up to the legacy. Honestly, I think it's a really, really, really solid album. I think, for whatever reason, I'm not sure why people slept on it so bad and why they hated on it so much, but it's actually a really good album. If you're a boot camp fan, if you're an East Coast hip-hop fan, and you haven't checked this out or you have any reservations about it, definitely listen to it, because a lot of people just slept on that. This was a part of a trilogy of albums from the boot camp's comeback. This was Buckshot linking up with Ninth Wonder, fully produced by Ninth. I consider this personally, for me, this is a classic album. I have a lot of nostalgia attached to it. I rode around with this. The year it came out, I probably listened to this every day for that whole year. Like, I really, truly love this album. It was nice to see Buckshot finally get his props, too. This was him and Ninth Wonder's follow-up, which I didn't enjoy as much. Still a solid album. Ninth Wonder's one of those producers that's kind of hit or miss with me. I either really, really like his production, or it just kind of sounds bland and formulaic. This one was a little more bland, but it's still a decent record. I believe they have a third one. I know they have a third one. They might have a fourth one. I don't have the other ones, though. OGC, the original Gun Clappers. Strange Wanda, Top Dog, Louisville Slugger. This is, OGC is definitely the most underrated, underappreciated group within the boot camp clique. And I think both of their albums, both that one and Empire Strikes Back, both of them are low-key boot camp classics. I'm not sure why these are so heavily overlooked, but these are really, really solid East Coast, just great boom bap hip hop. I would highly recommend both of those OGC records. This one is somewhat controversial because it is widely considered to be a classic. It is widely considered to be one of the most important hip hop albums released in the 90s. Smith & Wesson's The Shinin'. Sometimes I listen to this album and I understand and I get it and I think, man, this is brilliant. The Beat Miners really hooked him up with some great production. Other times I listen to it and it bores the hell out of me. For whatever reason, sonically, I just find this to be a very boring album at times. I have to really be in the right mood for it. But I mean, it's still widely considered to be a classic for a reason. A lot of people love this album. It's just not one that I would recommend as your first boot camp record. Actually, they had to rename themselves the Cocoa Brothers because they were sued by the Smith & Wesson gun. So they had to change their name. They came out with Cocoa Brothers, The Rude Awakening. I thought this was a more enjoyable album, personally. So whenever I'm in the mood for a Smith & Wesson project, this is usually the first one I grab. I think a lot of people slept on this one, maybe because of the name change. But it's definitely my preferred Smith & Wesson album. This was their contribution to the Comeback trilogy. It was definitely the weakest of all three of those albums. It's not one that I revisit very often, but it did have a few tracks on there that I really enjoyed. And this was possibly one of the most disappointing albums that I have in my collection, just because I thought the idea of Smith & Wesson with an album fully produced by Pete Rock, I thought that was brilliant. Pete's production on this, though, man, is just very, very lackluster. Very disappointing. It might be the worst Pete Rock produced project out there. This should have been a classic. This should have been just a home run, no brainer, but it's just really disappointing. I would not recommend that. General Steel, one half of Smith & Wesson, obviously. A lot of people didn't check for this one either. There's a lot of these solo boot camp records that people just kind of slept on. I thought this was really great. It has a very cinematic feel to the production. I think if you're a fan of the Smith & Wesson stuff, you cannot go wrong with this one, and I very highly recommend it. The other side of the coin is Tech. I don't have a lot to say about Tech's projects. None of Tech's solo material really grabbed me in a way that I would have liked. It's just kind of, I don't want to say generic, like it's a bad thing, but it's not captivating music for me personally. Definitely not as good as the Smith & Wesson stuff. Helter Skelter, which was the duo of Rockness Monster and the absolutely legendary Sean Price. This was their debut album. It's a classic album. Sean Price and Rock were easily the best lyricists in all the boot camp clique. They're given dark, grimy production on this, and they just wild out over it, just rhyming. Incredible classic. If you want some early boot camp clique, that's a great starting point. Their follow-up, like pretty much every single boot camp follow-up, was heavily overlooked. Still a great album. Everything that these two did together is worth listening to. And Sean Price and Rock just got better and better and better as rappers. That one is a solid one. Not as good as their debut, but it's still a great album. One of the goofiest covers ever. It's not a bad record, though. It's their weakest album. I will say that it is their weakest project. I don't think the production matches the level of lyricism that they bring to the table, but it's more Sean Price, and you cannot go wrong with Sean Price. The album that might single-handedly be what saved the boot camp clique. This was what kicked off the trilogy of revitalizing albums. Monkey Bar is considered to be a classic. Solid album in my opinion. I think it does have some weak tracks, but I also think it has some of his best tracks. My favorite Sean Price track is Peep My Words, the opening track. That's still to this day my favorite Sean P track. That one is an absolute must though. And the last album on the shelf, Jesus Price Superstar, which the general consensus seems to be that it's the better of those first two albums. I actually wasn't a huge fan of the flow that he used on this. He used a very choppy stop and go style. I much prefer Sean when he's just straight spitting nonstop. That being said, production on this is really, really good. Ninth Wonder, I believe, is on this. A lot of really soulful beats. It's still a great, solid album, even if it's not my preferred Sean Price album. You still can't go wrong with that. And, ladies and gentlemen, just like that, we are finished with another shelf. So next time, we're going to be finishing off the rest of the boot camp material, and then we're going to be digging into nonfiction, Ill Bill, Necro, a lot of horrorcore, a lot of really dirty, filthy underground hip hop. So I hope you guys are enjoying these, and thank you for checking it out.